Hello everyone, good morning and welcome back to my channel Learn English. This is me, Mrs. Sheetal Jain Pillai, presenting lesson number 4.4, The Sign of Four, Part 2. For those who haven't viewed my video on Part 1, are requested to go back to my channel and view Part 1 in order to be clear on the first three chapters which are included in your textbook. Part 1 gives us a recap about Mr. Watson, Sherlock Holmes and Miss Mary Maudsley's story about her missing father. In part 2, we will be discussing about the outline of the story, which means what happens from chapter number 1 to chapter number 14, the plot of the story and the synopsis of the story. Part 2 will also have the discussion of question and answers and the brainstorming exercises explained in detail. So please stay tuned while we unveil the story of the Sign of Four, the hidden Agra treasure and the missing Major Maudsley. In part 1, we discussed about three major characters in the story The Sign of Four, which is Sherlock Holmes, the lead character who's working as a detective, Mary Maudsley, the daughter of the missing Major Maudsley, John Watson, who's the friend of Sherlock Holmes. We also discussed about Major Sholto, who was the friend of the missing Major Maudsley. Major Sholto had two sons, Thaddeus Sholto and Bartholomew Sholto. Tonga is a pygmy. You will know about him as I read the outline of the story. And Toby is the dog who helps Sherlock Holmes in solving his mysterious stories. The Sign of Four is written by Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle, who lived from 22 May 1859 until 7th July 1930. He was a British writer who created the famous character Sherlock Holmes. Originally a physician, he published the first of four novels and more than 50 short stories about his famous character Sherlock Holmes and Sherlock Holmes' friend Dr. Watson. The Sherlock Holmes stories are generally considered milestone in the field of crime fiction. Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle is a prolific writer. Other than Holmes stories, his works include fantasy and science fiction stories about Professor Challenger and humorous stories about the soldier Brigadier Gerard, as well as plays, romances, poetry, non-fiction and historical novels. The Sign of Four is the second novel of Arthur Conan Doyle in which Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson solve the mystery of the hidden treasure and a murder. Let's begin with the outline of the novel, students. The picture that you can see on the slide in front of you is of Miss Mary Maudsley and Dr. Watson. So the novel begins with Holmes and Dr. Watson engaged in a discussion when Mary Maudsley, a young woman who desires advice from Sherlock Holmes, visits the two at their place. During the meeting, Mary tells Sherlock Holmes about her father's disappearance under mysterious circumstances some 10 years ago. And after that, she started receiving large pearls on the same day every year. She also tells Sherlock Holmes about the letter that she received this morning that asked her to get two of her friends and reach the Lyceum Theatre. The letter gives her a hint that some injustice has been done to her. Holmes and Watson agree to accompany Mary. Soon Watson and Mary are attracted to one another. Students, for the dates, you need to refer part 1, which is posted on my channel. So the three of us start heading to the Lyceum Theatre as advised in the letter, and soon they were whisked away in a darkened carriage to a strange house. There they meet a gentleman called Thaddeus Sholto. Thaddeus Sholto is the son of Major Sholto, who was the friend of Mary's father. Thaddeus Sholto reveals some important details about Mary's father. He reveals that not only has Mary's father died, but she is also a partial heir to the great hidden treasure. Thaddeus explains about Major Sholto and how he lived in fear all day long about a man with wooden legs, and on many occasions Major Sholto struck out at perfect strangers who were handicapped. On the deathbed, while Major Sholto was just about to reveal to his sons about the great treasure, he saw the face of a bearded man appearing in the window, and on seeing that, he suffered a fatal heart attack. The next morning, a note which read the sign of 4 was found on Major Sholto's body. Thaddeus proceeds to explain that after searching for years for the treasure, his brother Bartholomew discovered it in an hidden attack in the family house. On the deathbed, Major Sholto made sure the brothers promised to him that they would share the treasure with Mary Motson, who had some unknown claim in the fortune. Thaddeus concludes by entreating the three to accompany him to the family estate, where the fortune will be divided amongst the three. As soon as they leave for the family estate and reach the family estate, they find a shaken housekeeper who claims that Bartholomew did not come out from his locked room all day. When Holmes and Watson was peeping through the keyhole, they find an unnatural grinning face leering at them. So they decided to break open the door, and they find that Bartholomew is poisoned with a thorn which is lodged in his neck. After investigating for some time, Sherlock Holmes concludes that two persons, one of whom had a wooden leg, committed the crime. According to Holmes, the second person who committed the crime was an interesting individual. It becomes apparent that the murderers have stolen the great Agra treasure. After some investigation, Holmes deduces that the wooden-legged man stepped on creosote. Creosote is some kind of a cement which has a beautiful scent and smell. Taking this as a lead, Holmes and Watson borrow a dog to follow the scent, and that dog is none other than Toby, who loves the smell of creosote. Their search leads them to the edge of Thames, where it is clear that the two criminals hired a boat. Over the next few days, Holmes recruits his agents, who are the gang of sea urchins, to search the river for the boat. However, when these efforts fail, Holmes himself in disguise makes a search and discovers that the boat, called Aura, has been camouflaged. That night, Holmes, Watson, and several other officers pursue the Aura in a police barge. They gradually overtake the boat, which contains a wooden-legged man and a small pygmy native from the Andaman Islands. The native tries to shoot Holmes with a blowpipe, however, consequently gets shot down by both Holmes and Watson. The Aura runs on ground, and the wooden-legged man becomes entrapped in mud and subsequently gets captured. That wooden-legged man is Jonathan Small. He is brought back to Baker Street along with an iron box which was found on the boat. Captain Jonathan Small proceeds to relay his story of the Agra treasure, which began when he was stationed as a fortress gatekeeper in India. Small explains that he was approached by three Arab Gans and offered to share in a great fortune if he would help them murder a man who carried it. Small agreed. When the man, an emissary from a wealthy sheikh family, arrived, the three Arabs murdered the man as Small blocked his escape. Then the four conspirators hid the treasure, but soon after they were arrested for the murder of the ambassador. Small was sent to a penal colony on Andaman Islands, where he managed to befriend a native Tonga who became his loyal companion. Then Small later on bribed two of the guards on the island, who were Sholto and Marston, that is Mary's father, into helping him escape in exchange for a share in the fortune. The two agreed, and Sholto left to bring back the treasure. After some time, it became apparent to Small that Sholto had betrayed him, and he escaped from the island with the help of Tonga. After many years, Small had tracked down Sholto and just arrived in time to see him die. After the death, Small affixed the note that was found on the body as a reference to himself and the three Arab companions. When he returned to Sholto estate, Tonga murdered Bartholomew and the two stole the treasure. Small concludes his narrative by revealing that in course of the chase on Thames, he threw the treasure overboard. Small is taken to prison, and Watson, who has come to love Mary Watson, proposes to her. Let's discuss the theme of the novel Sign of Four. The theme of the novel revolves around the Agra treasure throughout the story. The appearance of the treasure leads to a direct and often tragic change in the lives of the characters. Because of this, it is important that the removal of the treasure would cause the characters to return to their previous position. In the case of Small, the re-emergence of the treasure leads him down a path that ends in murder. With the removal of the treasure, he is a prisoner once again. Mary Morstan is a charming young woman whom Watson contemplates marrying. However, when it was discovered that the Agra treasure is gone, Mary returns to a position in which Watson can comfortably propose marriage. The shallowness of wealth and the destruction that can come through it is also seen prevailing throughout the novel. As the Agra treasure directly and adversely affects almost everyone, in the course of the story, the Sheikh ambassador and Bartholomew are both murdered for treasure. Tonga is killed while fleeing with it, and Small is sentenced to life imprisonment. Additionally, both Thaddeus and his father spend their lives constantly paranoid about a wooden-legged man and about strangers in general. The Agra treasure even provides a romantic conflict for Dr. Watson, who feels that he cannot marry Miss Morstan for the fear that he will appear to be after her money. Let's discuss the plot of the novel, The Sign of Four. The novel has a complex plot involving service in India, the Indian Rebellion of 1857, a stolen treasure, a secret pact among four people who were convicts, the four of the title, and two corrupt prison guards, that was Sholto and Marston. According to Mary, in December 1878, her father had telegraphed her upon his safe return from India and requested her to meet him at London Langham Hotel. When Mary arrived at the hotel, she was told that her father had gone out the previous night and had not returned. Despite all efforts, no trace was ever found of him. Mary contacted her father's only friend, Major John Sholto, who was in the same regiment, lived in England, but he denied knowing her father had returned. The second puzzle is that she had received 6 pearls in the mail from an anonymous benefactor 1 year since 1882, one per year since 1882, after answering an anonymous newspaper query inquiring about her. With the last pearl she received a letter remarking that she has been wronged and asking for a meeting. Holmes takes the case and soon discovers that Major Sholto had died in 1882 and that within a short span of time Mary started getting the pearls, implying a connection. The only clue Mary can give Holmes is a map of a fortress found in her father's desk with the names of the four convicts, that is, Jonathan Small, Mohammed Singh, Abdullah Khan, and Dost Akbar. Hence the title, The Sign of Four. Holmes, Watson, and Mary meet Thaddeus Sholto, the son of the late Major Sholto and the anonymous sender of pearls. Thaddeus confirms the Major had seen Mary's father that night he died. They had arranged a meeting to divide a priceless treasure Sholto had brought home from India. While quarreling over the treasure, Captain Morstan, long in weak health, suffered a heart attack. Not wanting to bring attention to the object of the quarrel and also worried that circumstances would suggest that he had killed Morstan in an argument, particularly since Morstan's head struck to the corner of the chest as he fell, Sholto disposed of the body and hid the treasure. However, he himself suffered from poor health and an enlarged spleen, possibly due to malaria, as a queen bottle stands by his bed. His own health became worse when he received a letter from India in early 1882. Dying, he called his two sons and confessed to Morstan's death and was about to divulge the location of the treasure when he suddenly cried, "Keep them out," before falling back and dying. The puzzled sons glimpsed a face in the window, but the only trace was a single footstep in the dirt. On their father's body is a note reading the sign of four. Both brothers quarrelled over whether a legacy should be left to Mary Morstan, and Thaddeus left his brother Bartholomew, taking a chaplet and sending its pearl to Mary. The reason he sent the letter is that Bartholomew has found the treasure and possibly Thaddeus and Mary might confront him for a division of it. Bartholomew is found dead in his home from a poisoned dart and the treasure is now missing. While the police strongly take Thaddeus as a suspect, Holmes deduces that there are two persons involved in the murder: a one-legged man, Jonathan Small, as well as another small accomplice. He traces them to a boat landing where Jonathan Small has hired a steamboat named the Aurora. With the help of the dog Toby, he sends Watson to collect from Mr. Sherman the Baker Street irregulars and his own disguise. Holmes traces the steam launch. In a police steam launch, Holmes and Watson chase the Aurora and capture it. But in the process, they end up killing the pygmy who was the companion of Jonathan Small. After that, Small tries to escape but is captured. However, the iron treasure box is empty. Jonathan Small claims to have dumped the treasure over the side during the chase. The picture that you can see on this slide is of Jonathan Small, who is a wooden-legged man, and a pygmy named Tonga, who are best friends and who come to London in search of the Agra treasure. So Small confesses that years before he was a soldier of the 3rd Buff in India and lost his right leg in a swimming accident to a crocodile. After some time, the Indian Rebellion of 1857 occurred, where he was forced to flee for his life to the Agra fortress. While standing, he was overpowered by two Sikh troopers who gave him a choice of being killed or being an accomplice to waylaying a disguised servant of a Raja, who sent the servant with a valuable fortune in pearls and jewels to the British for safekeeping. The robbery and murder took place and the crime was discovered, although the jewels were not. Small gets imprisoned on the Andaman Island, and after 20 years, he overheard that John Sholto had lost much money gambling and cannot even sell his commission. Therefore, he will have to resign. Small saw his chance and made a deal with Sholto and Arthur Morstan. Sholto would recover the treasure and in return send a boat to pick up Small and the Sikhs. Sholto double-crossed Morstan and Small and stole the treasure for himself after inheriting a fortune from his uncle. Small vowed vengeance and 4 years later escaped from the Andaman Island with an islander named Tonga after they both killed a prison guard. The news of the escape had shocked Sholto into his fatal illness. Small arrived too late to hear of the treasure's location, but left a note which referred to the name of the pact between himself and the three Sikh guards. When Bartholomew found the treasure, Small had only planned to steal the treasure. However, the miscommunication between Tonga and Small led to kill Bartholomew as well. Small claims that the Agra treasure brought nothing but bad luck to anyone who came in touch with it. The servant who was murdered, the Sholto living with fear and guilt, and now he himself is trapped in slavery for life. He spent half his life building a breakwater in the Andaman Island, and he will be spending rest of his life digging drains in Dartmoor prison. Mary Morstan is left without the bulk of the Agra treasure, although she will apparently receive the rest of the chaplet. John Watson, who is the friend of Sherlock Holmes, falls in love with Mary, and it is revealed that at the end he proposes to her and she has accepted the proposal. Last, we come to the synopsis of the extract, where Dr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes were discussing on a general issue when they were interrupted by the arrival of Miss Mary Morstan, who has a case for Sherlock Holmes to solve. Mary tells about her father's sudden disappearance on a trip many years ago. A few years later, an advertisement was published in a newspaper asking for her address, which she gave, and ever since, on the same day of each year, she received a rare and expensive pearl. This continued for some more years, but today she received a letter asking to meet her. The letter warned Mary not to bring the police with her. Mary requests Holmes and Watson to accompany her to place so that they can figure out the secret behind it. Both agree to accompany her. Sherlock Holmes recommends Dr. Watson to read the Winwood book Martyrdom of Man and leaves the room in search of some reference and facts that are essential for the case. After returning from the investigation, Sherlock shares his finding with Watson. He believes that the death of Major Sholto, Mary's father's only friend in London, has something to do with the mysterious pearls she has been receiving every year. Sherlock believes that Sholto's heir knows that Mary has been wronged in some way and may be seeking to rectify the problem. Later, Mary arrives at Baker Street as planned. Both Sherlock Holmes and Watson accompany her to the appointment with the mysterious letter writer. Mary has brought a paper of her father with her which she wasn't been able to decipher. She felt that the paper might be pertinent to the case in some way. It might help Holmes to decode the mystery and find the disappearance of her father. Sherlock examines the paper and puts it away for safekeeping. He, Watson, and Mary go to the meeting. There, a person asks them any of them are police officers, which they deny. The person, who is apparently a servant of the person they are meeting, then drives them into a carriage. The trio arrive in a less fashionable part of London, a more like a run-down, working-class neighborhood. They are escorted inside a house by a servant. Coming to the brainstorming questions. Question number 1. Read the extract and complete the web by highlighting the qualities of the following characters. The characters of Dr. Watson, after reading the outline, synopsis and plot, we can deduce that Dr. Watson was observant, compassionate, obedient, loyal, honest, and admiring. Highlighting the qualities of Miss Morstan, according to the extract, the qualities of Miss Austen are she's friendly, she's calm, she's polite and bold, whereas Sherlock Holmes was intelligent, observant, calm, and reticent. Describe the character of Mary Austen from Dr. Watson's point of view. Dr. Watson found Mary very attractive. He was mesmerized by her smile and by her voice. He also calculated her age and thought her to be very matured for her age. The tenacity which she faced the problem was indeed commendable according to Watson. Watson even went ahead thinking Mary as his future wife. He started comparing his credentials with hers in the process of realizing the fact that she was far ahead and he was no match to her. Holmes is the leading character in the extract. Yes, definitely he is the leading character in the extract because Mary knew that Holmes and his repute would help her in her case. Mary's father had disappeared and never returned. She came across an advertisement asking for her address, which she gave, and ever since then, on the same day, she received a rare and expensive pearl. When Mary received a letter asking her to come over to a place to unravel a secret association with her life, Mary then approaches Holmes as she was certain he could solve the puzzle. Holmes scrutinizes the paper that Mary produced and he deciphers that the paper was made in India. The paper was pinned to a board. The diagram upon it was a plan of a large building with numerous halls and corridors. He also draws attention towards the red mark that was on the paper. On the paper were names that read Jonathan Small, Mohammed Singh, Abdullah Khan, Dost Akbar. Since the papers are evident document, they were kept carefully in a pocket inside a book as clean as the others. Thus Holmes deciphers the mystery and is indeed the central character. Dr. Watson, the narrator, is one of the major characters in the novel. Illustrate. Yes, Dr. Watson is one of the major characters in the story. First of all, he is a doctor by profession and has a background as a surgeon in the army. Watson helps Holmes throughout the story, though it cannot be denied that major breakthroughs in the case are always the results of Holmes' brilliance. Holmes always confirms the observation with Watson. Holmes uses Watson as a sounding board for his ideas. Watson might not see the problem as clearly as Holmes does, but it leads Holmes towards the problem. Watson is all for Holmes in four signs. He saves the story for posterity. He has a remarkable quality of knowing a person rather than seeing him as a mere factor as Holmes does. Holmes is always one step ahead of Dr. Watson in solving the cases. Holmes displays the intelligence in four signs. Watson simply found Mary attractive while Holmes was mere calculating machine. He considered Mary as a client with a problem only. Similarly, Watson couldn't make anything of the scribble while Holmes deciphered the long letters. In the common herd, men of characters differentiate their long letters, however illegibly they may write, said Holmes. Thus he was ahead of Watson in many ways. Arrange the sentences in correct sequence as per their occurrence in the extract. First one, Mary Austen was well-dressed young lady. Second, Mary's father was an officer in an Indian regiment. Then Mary received large and lustrous pearls through the post. Holmes gave Winwood's book, Martyrdom of Man, to Dr. Watson. Holmes put a revolver in his pocket. Question number 2, second one. In plot, we need to discuss the importance of the following statements from the light of the extract. The trio Holmes, Dr. Watson and Mary decided to visit Lyceum Theatre because Mary tells Holmes that she had received a letter instructing her to go to the Lyceum Theatre with two of her friends. The letter gives her a hint that some injustice has been done to her. Once Holmes and Watson hears that, they agree to accompany Mary. Soon Watson, Mary and Holmes head to the Lyceum Theatre. They are whisked away in a darkened carriage to a strange house. Inside the house, they find an eccentric gentleman named Thaddeus Sholto, who reveals that Mary's father died leaving behind great hidden treasures. Second one, Mary received pearls every year on the same day because after the disappearance of Mary's father, she informs Holmes that Mary's father disappeared mysteriously. A few years later, she was surprised to see an advertisement which was published in the newspaper asking for her address. Mary gave her address, and ever since she gave the address, she has been receiving a rare and expensive pearl every year on the same date. This continued for some more years, but one day she received a letter and was asked to meet the addresser at the Lyceum Theatre. C. Holmes carefully examined the paper given by Mary. Mary handed over the paper to Holmes, which was found in Mr. Morrison's closet. He examined the paper carefully and said the paper was made in India. The diagram appeared to be a plan of a large building with numerous halls and corridors. He draws aviation towards red mark, and above it is 3.37 from the left in faded pencil writing. In the left hand side is curious hieroglyphic like four crosses in a line with arms touching. Finally, names of four and sign of four is revealed. That is Muhammad Khan, Dost Akbar, Muhammad Singh, Abdullah Khan. The paper, being an evident document, was carefully kept in a pocket book of one side and was as clean as the other papers found in the closet. Question number 3, setting. In this slide, we need to discuss about various references from the extract that tells us about the time and period of the events. So the period of the events are revolving around the year 1857, which involves the service in India, rebellion of 1857, and a secret pact between four convicts. The date asked Holmes. He disappeared on 3rd December 1878, nearly 10 years ago. So the time period was around 1857 to 1878. The story began to unfold. The great unrest of 1857 and in 1878, Mary's father telegraphed her upon his safe return from India and requested her to meet him in the Langham Hotel in London. The second one, Holmes discovers that Major Sholto had died in 1882. The lines that prove it is about 6 years ago, upon the 4th of May 1882, an advertisement appeared. So around 5 years after the disappearance of Captain Morstan, Mary received a message through newspapers, and she began receiving pearls, and Holmes discovered that the same year Sholto had died, and he found some kind of a resemblance between the two incidents. So various places of importance are mentioned in the novel The Sign of Four, and we will be discussing each one in brief. The importance of Edinburgh. Mary was placed in a comfortable boarding at Edinburgh after her mother passed away. Mary remained at Edinburgh until she was 17 years old. In the year 1878, Mary's father, who was a senior captain of his regiment, obtained 12 months' leave and came home. At his safe arrival to London, Mary went to meet him, but to her dismay lost track of him as the father disappeared. So this is the importance of Edinburgh. She was in a boarding school in Edinburgh. Next is Andaman Islands, where Jonathan Small was a prisoner and his friend Tonga was a native in Andaman Islands. Small bribes two guards, and their names are Sholto and Morstan, to help him escape in exchange for a share in the fortune. The two guards agree, and Sholto leaves to bring back the treasure. After some time, it had become apparent to Small that Sholto had betrayed everyone, and therefore Jonathan Small escapes from the island with the help of Tonga. Thus, Andaman Island plays an important role in the novel. Agra. The story revolves around a treasure which is named after the city, Agra. The wooden-legged man, that is Jonathan Small, is caught by Holmes and brought to the Baker Street along with an iron box which was found on the boat. Jonathan Small proceeds to tell his story of the Agra treasure. He says that they all were stationed as a fortress gatekeeper in India. Jonathan Small explains that he was approached by three Arab guards and was offered a share in a great fortune if he would help them murder a man who carried it. Thus, the theme of the novel revolves around the Agra treasure. Throughout the story, the appearance of the treasure leads to a direct and often tragic change in the lives of the characters. Lyceum Theatre. Miss Morstan received a letter where she was asked to be at the Lyceum Theatre, and she was asked to stand outside. It was clearly mentioned in the letter that she had to get two of her friends along if she was scared of coming alone. But her friends should not be from police department, the letter stated clearly. Thus, the Lyceum Theatre holds a great significance as the story unfolds. Thaddeus at Lyceum Theatre explains Mary that her father had left treasure for her. On his deathbed, the elder Sholto revealed to his sons the existence of the treasure. Before he could tell them where it was, a face of a bearded man appeared in the window, and the old man suffered a fatal heart attack. The last one is London. It all started in London, December 1878, when Mary received a telegram from her father, who informed her that he would be back from India and will be stationed in the Langham Hotel, London. When Mary arrives at the hotel, she was told that her father had gone out the previous night and hadn't returned. Despite all the efforts, she couldn't find him. So later, again, London plays an important role as Mary contacts her father's friend Major Sholto, who lives in England. Sholto too passes away in 1882, and ever since his demise, Mary starts getting a pearl every year and finally a letter asking her to meet Thaddeus Sholto, the son of late Major Sholto. Thaddeus confides to Mary that his father had met Mary's father that night, and he died to divide the priceless treasure. The death too caused due to fist and fury between them. So on the date of dying, Sholto requested his sons to contact Mary and give her the treasure. So London holds a great value as the story starts in London. Mary approaches Holmes in London. Together the trio go to the theatre to meet Sholto's son in London. Various streets of London are also given as reference. Question number 4. Basically, the setting of the extract is in London, but it has some references of India too. Explain how the setting of the extract contribute to the theme of the novel. There are references of the Great Indian Rebellion in the year 1857. Mary's father was in India during that time. On 3rd December 1878, he returns to London and stays at the Langham Hotel, London. Major Sholto, who was a part of the 34th Bombay Infantry, dies in London on 28th April 1882. So basically, when in London, Mary's father should have met Sholto in 1878. However, Sholto denies it. 4 years later, Sholto also dies, and within a week, Mary receives a letter. The extract begins when Mary Marston meets Sherlock Holmes at his house. After that, Holmes, Watson, and Mary visit some place in London. Explain in detail the various places mentioned in the extract. So, in the extract, in the lesson, there are places mentioned in detail from the Lyceum Theatre to Thaddeus Sholto's home. So you are requested to read the chapters in detail because the chapters are not mentioned in detail in the lesson and in the slide. So Lyceum Theatre, Mary is asked to come to Lyceum Theatre along with her friends. As the cab rattles down to the Lyceum Theatre, Sherlock mutters the name of the streets, which is Rosetta Row, Vincent Square, Vauxhall Bridge, Thames River, Wordsworth Road, Priory Road, Lark Hall Lane, Stockwell Place, Robert Street, Cold Harbour Lane. So these are all the lanes that they passed from Lyceum Theatre to Thaddeus Sholto's house. How does the series of action from London to India go about? Explained by citing references from the extract. Mary's father was an officer in an Indian regiment. Mary was sent home when she was quite a child. Mary's mother died and she was placed in a boarding at Edinburgh. In 1878, Mary's father, who was senior captain of his regiment, obtained a 12-month leave and came home. He telegraphed Mary from London that he was safe. Mary went to the Langham Hotel where she was informed that Captain Morstan was staying there, but the night before he went somewhere and never returned. Complete which places, cities in India and England are mentioned in the extract and write their importance. In India, there are two places which are mentioned in the novel, that is Andaman Islands and Agra. Mary's father was one of the officers in charge of the convict guard in the Andaman, and Agra, the treasure was stolen from a place called Agra. It is a bountiful collection of luxurious jewels. Second, London, Langham Hotel is mentioned and Lyceum Theatre is mentioned. The importance of Langham Hotel is Mary's father, after returning from India, stayed in London at the Langham Hotel from where he disappeared. And Lyceum Theatre is important because Mary received a letter stating her to meet at the Lyceum Theatre with two of her friends. That letter was sent by Thaddeus Sholto. Slide we will be discussing about the theme, and our first question is write in brief the theme of the extract. The theme of the extract revolves around the Agra treasure. Throughout the story, disappearance of the treasure leads to a direct and often tragic change in the lives of the characters. Mary, with the help of Holmes and Watson, investigates the missing block in the treasure mystery. Write about 4 or 5 lines about the meeting of Miss Marston with Holmes. Miss Mary came to Holmes to solve the mystery of her missing father. Mary urged Watson and Holmes to accompany her to the Lyceum Theatre, as she was asked to come there to discover more things about her missing father. Holmes examined various evidences and finally caught small hints, thereby solving the case. Write the central idea of the extract of the novel The Sign of Four. The Sign of Four is a detective story written and set in the Victorian time. Sherlock Holmes investigates and untimely solves a mystery of the hidden treasure and missing Captain Morstan. Question number 4. Themes give reason. Miss Marston plans to meet Sherlock Holmes. The reason is to solve the mystery of her missing father and also about knowing the treasure. Miss Marston gives the reference of Cecil Forrester because Mary worked as a governess at Mrs. Cecil's home. By her advice, she published her address in the advertisement column. In a singular case, Holmes remarked, it is a singular case. Most singular part is about 6 years ago an advertisement appeared in the Times asking for the address of Miss Mary, stating that it would be to her advantage to come forward. There was no name or address. Holmes needed some references. Mary came to Holmes because Holmes had once enabled Mrs. Cecil to unravel a little domestic complication. She was much impressed by her kindness and skill. Miss Marston received a pearl every year. Sholto instructed his sons to pass on Mary's share, so the eldest son, taking her address, sent her a pearl every year. The coachman confirmed that neither of Miss Marston's companions was a police officer. It was instructed in the letter that Mary should come to Lyceum Theatre. She can come with her friends, but not police officers. Question number 5, we will be discussing language, and we need to elaborate the following lines in the light of the novel, The Sign of Four. You are an automation, a calculating machine. Which means Holmes is focused in his case and considers every character associated with the case as a factor in a problem. Next, letter speaks of giving her justice. What justice can she have? Mary deserves a share in the hidden treasure. The letter from Sholto is to inform her about the details of the treasure. Our quest does not appear to take us to a very fashionable region. The place where the trio were being taken was a forbidding neighborhood. Long lines of dull brick houses were relieved by coarse glare and tawdry brilliance of public houses at the corner. Question number 2 in language is following are some dialogues of major characters in the extract. Find out who the speaker is, his tone, style, significance, etc. of the dialogue. The first dialogue, you have once enabled my employer, Mrs. Cecil Forrester, to unravel a little domestic complication. She was much impressed by your kindness and skill. The speaker is Mary, to whom it was said was Holmes. The style is as a referral. You will, I am sure, excuse me. Dr. Watson speaks to Mary while he was joining in to get the theatre in search of the treasure. It was a request. Your statement is most interesting. Has anything else occurred to you? Holmes speaks to Mary in an interrogating tone of her missing father. Are you the parties who came with Miss Marston? Thaddeus speaks to Mary in a commanding style. The Sahib awaits you. The servant of Sholto speaks to Mary in a commanding, informing way of the arrival of the three guests. So that's all. We have discussed the plot, the synopsis, the outline of the story along with the brainstorming questions. So students, basically you will not get a passage in section 4. You will be asked to describe the character of various people. You will be asked to describe the character according to the point of view. You will be asked the time reference. You will be asked the series of action. You will be asked to write about the important places that are in the story and the novel. You will be asked the central idea. So you need to understand the question and answers. You need to read the story, the novel, according to the outline, according to the chapters given, and only when you read the story, that is when you will understand the importance of various places, the importance of each character, according to somebody else's point of view, the reason of uttering that statement, etc. So for section 4, you will not get a passage writing. You will be asked question and answers, and you will be able to write question and answers only and only when you know the complete story. So go back to my part 1, understand the story, which is in brief, and come back to your textbook, read all the chapters, and then you will be able to understand the question and answers which we have discussed in this slide. Thank you everyone. Thank you for staying tuned. Bye bye.